Hello, my name is, well, for now, that doesn't matter. Today I'm going to be talking about a new series I'm going to be writing called The Unsung Remnant. Now I know RWBY is in the title of the video, and I'm going to refer to it as RWBY, The Unsung Remnant, but that's just so people who are interested in RWBY can find it as it takes place in the same universe. In fact, the story starts roughly 30 years before the events of the main series. Now, before I get started with characters and plot details, I want to go over the history of that 80-year period after the Great War and how Remnant became the society it is at the start of the original RWBY series. Now, I'm going to be taking a more realistic look, but still keeping it very fantasy. The goal is to create a self-contained story that could work in the world of RWBY for the most part. Now, I'm going to abandon that idea altogether when I get into the changes I'm going to make to the lore of the world and how aura and semblances function. But that's going to be a story for another day. Right now, what I want to talk about is the history of the Reconstruction era and build out the timeline that took place the 80 years before the fall of Beacon. Following the Great War, social reform began under the guidance of the King of Vale and the Huntsman Academies. However, prejudices against the wildly controversial decision to free the Faunus sparked rising racial tensions. Grimm, which only grew in number during the Great War due to the rise of worldwide unease, led to the weakening of central governments in Vale and Mistral. While the rest of the world recovered lost territories, Mantle continued to subjugate their people with strong military industrial propaganda. Meanwhile, they continued to industrialize, which saw a boom in the industry and a strong military resurgence. Our story starts off taking place during the Vital Treaty in year 1 AGE. We have the implementation of the Remdalian calendar. Now, just as a side note, I decided to create the Remdalian calendar because there isn't a calendar in the RWBY universe. So take this with a grain of salt. But I guess all of this is all my idea anyway. The Remdalian calendar is the standard calendar system recognized by all major nations on Remnant. The calendar's implementation was part of the standardization efforts of the Vital Treaty and the establishment of the communication towers. The calendar was based off the Lundere calendar developed by Mantle, as it was considered to be the most accurate and easiest to modify for the modern world. One of the many issues that the Vital Treaty worked to solve was this new calendar issue, which could be implemented in every country. The King of Vale hoped that the standardization of calendars, systems, time, and language would bring together the world. While the disagreement on the calendar system plagued many discussions, it was agreed that a more scientific approach was needed to calculate time. To achieve this, the Lundere calendar was used and served as the base for the new calendar. The new calendar would continue to divide the year into 4 separate seasons, as it was common in Vale. The calendar, unlike the one used in Mistral, would use lunar cycles instead of solar cycles. It was calculated that a year would be equivalent to 416.43 days, which would be rounded to 416, giving them a leap year every 2 years. The lunar cycle would give them 16 months with 25 to 27 days per month. The first day of Vital would be the start of the new calendar, and it will be represented with 1 AGW after Great War. History before this point would count backwards, starting at 1 BGW before Great War. While the calendar was agreed upon by each nation, each would be given 5 years to fully implement the calendar, as it was believed that the cross-continental transmit system would be complete in this time frame. At the same time, in 1 AGW, founding of Beacon would take place. Outlined in the Treaty of Vital, the King of Vale would found the Huntsman Academies in each nation. The primary function of the school would be to reclaim the world from the Grimm. This would also join humanity in a common shared goal and responsibility. Huntsmen and huntresses were not to be trained as soldiers, but instead as an independent force unto themselves. On the day the treaty was signed, the first Huntsman Academy was opened. As a gesture of goodwill, all people were permitted to enroll regardless of what side of the war they were on. The school was met with thunderous applause from the citizens of Vale and Vacuo, who ultimately won the war. Now the propaganda machine could fully swing into motion as former soldiers and new eager citizens who want to become heroes of the reclamation movement enrolled. Mistral and Mantle, however, saw it as a power move from the King of Vale so he could keep tabs on their nations by planting pro-Vale indoctrination into the minds of their warrior class. While each nation signed the treaty, they were all given time before the King of Vale would arrive to found the new school, giving them creative liberties as to the location of the school in their capital and its overall design. Following the vital treaty, the King of Vale would return to Vacuo on the 4th month of year 1 AGW, where we will see the founding of Shade Academy. The support of the construction of the Huntsman Academy was higher in Vacuo than in Vale. The country witnessed firsthand the majesty of the King of Vale in the last battle of the war. Vacuo also did not want to make an enemy of Vale, the world's first true superpower. Vacuo, with its large dust mines, was a vitally important factor in making the Huntsman Academies a reality. This meant they would receive large amounts of aid from Vale and the rest of the world as production ramped up. Political reform headed by the Tristani noble family decentralized the government and created several loosely connected states. During this time, an interim confederacy was established. The central government continued to lose strength, resources, and power. The Huntsman Academy, Shade, would become the new central power of Vacuo, holding the loose collection of states together. Meanwhile, around the world in Mantle, the assassination of Kebler Ellis took place on the 5th month of year 1 AGW. As word slowly spread of the end of the war, the long-time business partnership between Nicholas Schnee and Kebler Ellis ended in assassination, as one new deposit of dust sparked a potential feud between the two. Businessman, philanthropist, and war hero Nicholas Schnee was accused of orchestrating the assassination of his biggest rival in Mantle following the end of the war. This was revealed to the world following the two dust companies arguing over the rights to the largest recorded dust deposit ever discovered in Mantle. While the story was silenced quickly after and soon forgotten, several members of the Keebler Mining Company also disappeared. The company soon collapsed with many of the members of their leadership quitting or jumping ship to the Schnee board. Following this, the company was absorbed by the Schnee Dust Company. The now Dust Titan would rival the largest companies in the world. During the 15th month of year 1 AGW, the King of Vale traveled to Mistral for the founding of Haven Academy. In Mistral, the King of Vale and his chosen headmaster were met with a lukewarm reception. Many people felt as though this was Vale's victory lap around the world. Tensions grew as the Huntsman Academy construction finally finished and the headmaster could be appointed in a grand ceremony. Many of the common citizens believed that Lilac Ishtar, who was a native-born Mistran, was a traitor to her people. Shortly after the King of Vale left Mistral, Lilac Ishtar was under public scrutiny. David Kendall, owner of the Mistral Times news press and one of her most vocal critics, would repeatedly attack her public image, citing that she refused to join the war efforts despite her long history as a warrior. Her reputation spiraled so much that Councilman Velmont Haston called for her resignation. David and Velmont's anti-Vale and anti-Haven rhetoric would eventually culminate in the Haston Rebellion. Now, while technically starting before the war, the Silverite clan genocide ended sometime in early year 2 AGW. The clan would reach a period of rapid decline throughout the centuries, especially during the Great War. In Mistral, the clan was abandoned because they refused to take part in the Great War. The clan chief, Zora Ashland, claimed her duty was to the world. Unbeknownst to Mistral at the time, the true reason was because they were given aid by the King of Vale. A long-standing treaty between the Silverite clan and the King of Vale caused the clan to remain neutral throughout the war, only traveling to kill creatures of Grimm that threatened every nation. It wasn't until intelligence about the secret treaty between the King of Vale and the clan that they were considered enemies of the state. The clan was forced to flee Mistral when Zoria and several warriors were executed for treason. While Mistral could not spare any troops to hunt down the rest of the clan due to the large presence of Grimm, most of the clan would not survive the exile. The clan was given asylum in Vale, where it was said that the king was impressed by their efficiency and dedication to hunting Grimm. In fact, he was so impressed that he took the name of the clan's warriors, huntsmen, and huntress later on for his schools. While in Vale, a rumored relationship formed between the King of Vale and one of the silver-eyed huntresses. However, no proof exists of such relationship, and it might just be fantasy. After the Great War, the clan returned to Mistral, where, over the course of only a few years, their numbers dwindled to only a dozen or so, before disappearing altogether. Following the disappearance of the Silver-Eyed clan on the third month of the second year of AGW, was the birth of Maria Calvira, widely accepted as one of the most talented and famous huntresses who ever lived. Maria Calvira, also known as Grim Reaper, was born in a small village somewhere to the south of Mistral. She was delivered to the King of Vale shortly after he arrived to found the Huntsman Academy. Maria would be raised by the headmaster of Haven Academy, who would go on to found Sanctum Academy Combat School for Maria when she became old enough to learn basic combat. The founding of combat schools would trend to other nations after Sanctum was founded. Maria would train under the headmaster, becoming a shining example of what a huntress is all about. However, before the end of the first school year at Haven, on the 5th month of the second year AGW, the Haston Rebellion took place. It was an attempted coup by Velmont Haston, one of the councilmen serving in Mistral. He rallied his constituents to take up arms against his fellow politicians, claiming them to be weak for bowing to the will of a foreign king and allowing him to choose policies that their kingdom must follow. The coup lasted 4 hours, with a reported 2 casualties. The coup was stopped by the fledgling Mistral Huntsman Academy's very own headmaster, Lilac Ishtar. Taking place shortly after the end of the Great War, the Haston Rebellion, started by Velmont Haston in Mistral, was an attempted coup on the newly established treaty set forth by the King of Vale and the school which he built there. Haston, a high-ranking councilman, grew in popularity over the course of the previous months due to his open disdain for the King of Vale. He claimed that the treaty directly targeted Mistral for a war that Vale started, and the distribution of land laid out in the treaty would give lands rightfully owned by Mistral to foreign powers. On top of all of this, the abolishment of slavery worldwide was not a power a foreign king could impose on the sovereignty of Mistral. The coup would end in failure, despite the initial instigation by the councilmen. The rebels that stormed the school were stopped by the headmaster, Lilac Ishtar, who, according to eyewitnesses, stopped them with an unexplainable might and unknowable semblance, which they claimed worked like magic. Haston and his conscripts were arrested and later banished from Mistral. The most difficult of the academies to start would be in Mantle, where it would not be founded until the second month of the third year AGW. At the time, we saw the creation of artificial dust and the founding of Atlas Academy. This was because amid the changes in political leadership, while the military and the rising corporations battled for control over the soul of Mantle, the discovery made by the Schnee Dust Company led to a new age of advancement. Increased industrialization in Mantle led to a rise in the middle class, leading to a lowering of poverty and an increase of on-site deaths due to poor working conditions. Industrialization also led to an increased belief in the military archetype. This line of thought was leading the country deeper and deeper into strategocracy, which would crumble away into corporatocracy. The ever-increasing industry led corporations to buy seats in political offices and military rank. The blatant corruption would continue unchecked as corporations managed to block any legislation that would affect the flow of money. This would change when the King of Vale's representative finally arrived and began the project to start the Huntsman Academy. While she was originally met with hostility, the Schnee Dust Company backed the founding of the school. Nicholas Schnee, being the genius entrepreneur he was, used the school to study dust and would patent any findings that he obtained, further cementing the Schnee Company at the forefront of dust research. The Schnee Company's close ties to the school would be shaken after an experiment led to the discovery of gravity dust. and the first artificially created dust. Nicholas hoarded the secret to creating artificial dust, having a leg up in the market. The secret of gravity dust would eventually slip, leading the Schnee Company to break ties with Atlas Academy. The Schnee Company, now having a majority control over the economy, began a new revolutionary development by creating the world's first internal research and development branch, or R&D department. Don't worry, for anybody who likes the animal people, I haven't forgot about them. They still have plenty more suffering to go through. On the third month of the fifth year AGW, we see the start of Vulture's Road, which would continue until the 10th month of year 6 AGW. After the signing of the Treaty of Vital, of course, slavery was abolished everywhere. However, this left many Faunus jobless, homeless, and unable to find work. Those that were not careful would find themselves as part of the underground slave trade run by major corporations that still relied on cheap labor to function. Many cities and towns forcibly removed Faunus populations and actively destroyed Faunus shanty towns that sprung up outside their borders. A group that came to be known as the Human Oath Keepers, or Hawk, formed to remove roaming Faunus populations. The group organized transportation to menagerie, often extorting Faunus they found for valuables first. The Human Oath Keepers were known to force Faunus from homes and businesses using violence and intimidation. The Faunus were forced to walk to the Human Oath Keepers' docks, where they would be round up in tight corridors, often stacked on top of each other, and spend weeks being shipped to menagerie. The paths the Faunus would have to take to get to these docks in Mistral became known as Vulture's Road, as many Faunus would not survive the trek due to starvation, wildlife, or grim. The Human Oath Keepers were disbanded by the King of Vale, Owen Steris Xander Erona IX, who used his wealth and influence to create safe passage to menagerie. His efforts would be backed by several beneficiaries, including the Schnee Dust Company. The company would go on to offer the Faunus jobs working in the dust mines in Mantle for quote-unquote fair wage. Rosenbaum, the leader of the now defunct Human Oath Keepers, went on to form a separate human supremacist group called True Children of Light that continued to engage in increasingly violent actions against the Faunus. The downtrodden people would begin a new religion called Faith Under Judgment, which started in the 5th month of year 5 AGW and would continue until the 2nd month of year 27 AGW. The new faith began during Vulture's Road, quickly spreading amongst Faunus survivors. The faith was started by Saint Victor, a former slave of the Schnee Company who managed to escape before emancipation. The teaching of Victor is that the judgment of the god of animals is upon the Faunus, and they must endure torment and suffering for another 2 generations. After this, the chosen champion of the god of animals will free the Faunus of oppression and deliver them the world. The philosophy of faith under judgment during St. Victor's time was that suffering is the natural state of the world, and only through giving up attachments and service to the god of animals can the Faunus be redeemed. A quote from him is that humans are tormentors to test the fortitude of the truly faithful. For this reason, they do not bear the resemblance of the god of animals. Members of this cult would knowingly be captured by slavers so that they can spread the message to more Faunus in slave camps. While this was happening, distrust and unease continued to rise in many places. Many people believed that the world was in a false state of peace and that at any moment war could break out again. That fear, anxiety, and distrust of the world's governments culminated in the formation of the anti-CCTS movement. The movement gained steam on the 6th month of year 5 AGW, but would continue to grow until the 8th year AGW. As the construction of the cross-continental transmit system neared completion, many people believed it to be a conspiracy to rid the world of their different cultures and beliefs. The King of Vale had already redrawn national borders, created a new calendar, freed the Faunus, and erected combat schools in every nation, led by people loyal to himself. To many, this was the final nail he needed for the world to truly be his. The anti-CCTS movement began in different parts of the world at different times under unrelated leadership. The most notorious of the group was called the Blue Night Boys. Their leader claimed that they were inspired by the True Children of Light and the Hashton Rebellion. This group sought to destroy the towers before completion through sabotage, and in an event known as the Blue Night, killed 12 workers with ice dust in the largest terrorist attack in Mistral. The ice pillars encased workers and the majority of the unfinished tower for 2 days. The Blue Night boys would later be caught, showing remorse for having killed the workers, claiming they didn't know anyone would be working at the tower that night. The leader, Jonathan Norback, would end up taking his own life in prison, never releasing an official statement about the night. Later that same year, in Mantle, on the 14th month of Year 5 AGW, and continuing until the 6th month of Year 7 AGW, we see the fall of Mantle's oligarchy, as it became known to historians. The Atlas Academy headmaster Bianca, a stout military supporter and a liberal idealist, found herself like-minded military leaders that was not part of the corporate cabal which infiltrated the government. Together, they began a campaign that would return the powers of rule to the now large middle class without the need of violent rebellion. Atlas headmaster Bianca, with the help of General Steeltrap, began an information campaign in the middle class, which would spark the need for regulation and reform in working conditions. They would eventually come across Jack Napier, who was already seen as a champion of the people of Mantle. Jack developed the idea of unions as a way for the people to protect themselves from corporations. The idea was further developed by Bianca and General Steeltrap, who continued to inform more and more people about the radical idea. Jack Napier would eventually be assassinated, with his death being ruled a murder theft and quickly closed. This left the emerging movement without a head, as the corporations didn't know Bianca's involvement with the group. She would use Jack's death as a martyr to publicly support the need for unions and to separate corporations from politics. She reopened Jack Napier's case using one of the students at Atlas who had a unique semblance to uncover the true assassin. The assassin admitted to being hired to kill Jack Napier, along with several other notable individuals, by members of Mantle's council. The call for the council members to resign and face jail time sparked riots in factories around the city. The council members who were found out to be involved were forcefully removed from office and discharged from the military. The remaining council members voted to approve the organization of unions to gain the favor of the people. However, several more council members would resign as investigation into their companies commenced, claiming that now as private citizens, their companies were not privy to unjust investigations. During the volatile time in Mantle, the creation of the gravity engine in the 9th month of Year 6 AGW put all eyes on the country. This was only possible because of the cooperation between major players throughout Mantle. At the same time as the fall of the Mantle oligarchy, the Schnee Dust Company, Mantle Military, Mantle Motors Bros or MMB, and under the supervision of Councilwoman Taylor Thicket, a top-secret project started. The project would become the world's first international development project, as dust specialists from Vale were brought on board. The unveiling of the gravity engine shocked the world. Flying machines could levitate in the air by the manipulation of artificially created gravity dust. This would revolutionize transportation, industry, construction, war. Manufacturers the world over would take inspiration from the magnificent device, which threatened the position Vale held as the world's superpower, as Mantle had now surpassed it in technology, military, and industry. Okay guys, that's all I have for you today. This video is much longer than I originally planned, and I'm still only 6 years into the 80-year journey here. So in the future I'm going to make these videos shorter when I come out with more parts, but for now we're at the end, and since we're here, I'm going to do a couple of disclaimers. First, I don't read supplementary material on RWBY, nor do I or have I played any of the games or watched any lore videos on the show. I'm a casual fan at most of the show, and of course the show has a lot of flaws, but I don't like to see it as flaws. I like to see it as like a wide open canvas to create whatever you want. So as the series continues, I'm going to pick and choose elements that I like from the show, so I can create something fun on the way. Now this is a writing project for me, and I want feedback, which is the main reason I decided to post it on YouTube. Eventually I will post the entire timeline somewhere so that everyone can enjoy and criticize it while having the words in front of them. But for now, just like, subscribe, and comment on the video, and Look out for more updates because there should be more on the way.